No one expected her to show up. She wasn't on the list. She wasn't invited. And yet, there she was, Jasmine Crockett, standing at the entrance of a closed door, hearing that wasn't supposed to make headlines. Imagine this, a room full of powerful figures, thinking they control everything. And then she walks in. This wasn't just any meeting. It was a quietly assembled session titled Restoring Public Trust in the Judiciary. No live stream, no media, just a circle of hand-picked officials, shielded by silence and marble walls. But what if one uninvited guest could shatter that shield? And then Clarence Thomas walked in. No announcement, no official schedule, just an introduction. Special Counsel Thomas, a title that didn't exist before this morning. The room shifted, chairs straightened, papers shuffled. Every person in that chamber rose to their feet, except one. Jasmine Crockett stayed seated, her hands calmly folded, her eyes unwavering. She didn't say a word. Not then, but silence in that moment said everything. You could feel it, the discomfort in the room, the tension behind every glance. Some called it defiance, others dignity, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She wasn't there to perform, she was there to listen. And Clarence Thomas, well, he was ready to speak. He took the mic with practiced grace, his voice smooth, steady, deliberate. The courtroom, he began, is not a stage. Legal rulings are not performances. And the law, he paused, scanning the faces in front of him, should never be led by those who perform best in front of a camera. A slow, tight ripple of applause echoed from the back of the room. Not warm, not spontaneous, controlled, cold. Jasmine still said nothing, but the clerk recording minutes had already made a mistake 3 times. Janet Crocker, not Jasmine, 3 times, and she never corrected them. She didn't lean in, didn't raise a hand. Instead, she reached forward and pressed record. A soft click, almost inaudible, but it was there. In that moment, something shifted. What was she capturing? Thomas continued, his words now tinged with something else, something sharper. He spoke of those who, in his view, weaponized the courts for political theater. He criticized public figures who turned justice into spectacle. He didn't name names. He didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew exactly who he meant. But still, Jasmine said nothing. No smirk, no raised eyebrow, no rebuttal. Just a single motion opening a folder in front of her. Slowly, methodically, as if the pages inside held more than paper. They held purpose. She didn't read from it. She didn't flip through it. She simply let it rest quietly, right in front of her. The kind of quiet that makes people nervous. The kind of quiet that makes power uncomfortable. And that was just the beginning. Because what no one knew, what no one could have known, was that Jasmine wasn't here to argue. She was here to ask one question. Just one. But that question was going to shake the room, and before it was asked, before a single word left her lips, she would play something no one was ready to hear. A voice familiar, authoritative, and unmistakable. And when it played, everything changed. Because in that moment, the question wasn't whether Jasmine belonged in the room. The question became who else didn't deserve to be there. He leaned into the microphone like a man who believed the room already belonged to him. Clarence Thomas cleared his throat. The silence welcomed him, like it always had. And then with a voice heavy from years behind the bench, he said, "The courtroom is not a stage. Judgments are not performances. And the law," he paused, letting the words settle like dust, "should not be led by those who speak best to a camera." The room didn't erupt. It froze. Then came the applause. Not loud, not warm, not genuine. It was the kind of applause that felt required, the kind you hear when people are clapping more for their own protection than agreement. A few nods, a few murmurs, but mostly silence laced with tension. Jasmine Crockett sat motionless. She didn't clap. She didn't blink. And yet somehow her stillness was louder than the applause. She knew the line wasn't random. It was pointed, calculated. It meant to draw a line between them and her, between the old guard and whoever dared speak truth with clarity and conviction. But Jasmine didn't speak. Not yet. The court clerk, busy typing notes, leaned in to whisper. Janet Crocker recorded. A nod from across the bench confirmed it. Then again and again, 3 times. 3 separate entries. 3 times they got her name wrong. Janet, not Jasmine. A mistake or a message. She didn't flinch. She didn't correct them because Jasmine Crockett had learned long ago when people refuse to see you. Showing them won't work. But making them hear you, that changes everything. Her hand moved slowly toward a small device resting beside the folder. No fanfare. No announcement. Just a deliberate press. Click. The recording started. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Too quiet for most to notice at first. But those who did, they felt something shift. Thomas kept speaking unaware. He spoke about integrity, about order, about how the rule of law must rise above emotion. He repeated the word emotion twice, as if feeling too much was a weakness, as if passion and justice couldn't share the same space. But Jasmine, she didn't move. She didn't respond. She didn't have to, because something else was about to speak. A voice, a familiar one. And once it played, no amount of titles, robes, or applause would be enough to stop what came next. Because while Thomas tried to erase her with the wrong name, she had just pressed record on the one thing no one could ignore. The truth. His voice wavered just for a moment, barely enough for the room to notice. But Jasmine did. It came right after the word performers, right after he tried to draw a clean line between justice and public attention. Clarence Thomas adjusted his glasses. Then he leaned in again. The ones who talk the loudest, he said slowly, are often the ones afraid of being quiet. A beat, then another. He let the words hang in the air like a dare. And again, he didn't name anyone, but everyone knew exactly who he meant. You could feel it in the room. The way heads turned ever so slightly toward her, the way eyes darted not for answers, but for reactions. But Jasmine didn't give them any. She didn't flinch, didn't scoff, didn't even look up. She sat still, her breath even, unmoved, almost detached. And that's what made them nervous. Because when a person stays silent long enough, you start to wonder if they're listening or if they're preparing. Clarence Thomas shifted in his seat. His tone grew sharper, almost impatient. He spoke about politicians who hijack the judiciary, about how emotions and theatrics are turning the courts into battlegrounds of public opinion. The more he spoke, the more he emphasized the dangers of turning law into narrative. But the more he talked, the more something strange started to happen. His voice didn't sound as steady. It sounded defensive, like a man not delivering judgment, but justifying himself. Still, Jasmine said nothing. No interruptions. No sarcasm. No defense. She didn't need to defend herself. She wasn't on trial. She wasn't the one trying to convince the room of her innocence. She was just waiting. And then she moved slowly, deliberately. She reached forward and opened the folder in front of her. Not with urgency, not with flair, just 2 fingers sliding across the edge, lifting the cover, revealing the contents inside. Papers, neatly stacked, labeled, highlighted, filed. She didn't read from them, didn't wave them around. She simply laid them open, let them breathe. Like evidence being given a moment to stretch before being called forward. She didn't look at Clarence Thomas. She didn't look at the clerk. She didn't even look at the people now, whispering to each other behind folded hands. She just kept her eyes on the page. And in that silence, something undeniable rose up. Control. She had it. He had the microphone. But she had the room. Because while Thomas tried to win with speeches, Jasmine was holding something far more powerful. Proof. And the room could feel it. Even if they didn't know what was inside that folder yet, they could feel that something was coming. Something he couldn't talk his way out of. She didn't look up, didn't speak. I just moved her finger toward the small device on the table and pressed play. A soft click, then static. The kind of ambient hum you only hear in a room where no one knows they're being recorded. A low shuffle, a cough in the distance, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, then the voice, low, familiar, authoritative, and unmistakably Clarence Thomas. They can scream all they want, the voice said, calm and unbothered. But we're the ones who wrote the system, Every breath in the room caught in midair. No one moved. The voice continued. 7 million went out. It's not a bribe. It's finesse. No background noise. No edits. No ambiguity. Just a sentence that cut through the room like a blade. And then the final line, as long as it's under her name, who's going to question it? Silence. True silence. Not the kind you plan. The kind that happens when a room realizes it's just heard something it wasn't supposed to. Some tried to look away. Others stared directly at Jasmine, as if searching for any sign that it wasn't real. That somehow this was taken out of context, or fabricated, or misunderstood. But they all knew there was no denying the voice. There was no denying the tone, and there was no denying the truth. This was Clarence Thomas in a private conversation discussing money, influence, and the untouchable shield of his wife's name. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't threatened. He hadn't even sounded angry. And that's what made it worse. It sounded normal. Like this was just the way things worked. A quitte transaction, a subtle manœuvre, a game behind the curtain. And Jasmine, she didn't say a word. She didn't pause the recording. I didn't rewind it. Didn't offer commentary. She simply let the words hang in the air like smoke in a sealed room. One sentence at a time. They settled into the minds of everyone sitting there. The aides, the clerks, the senators, even Thomas himself. And still, she said nothing because she didn't need to explain what had just happened. They heard it. And once something is heard, it can't be unheard. Especially not when it comes from the one man who had just told them courts weren't stages and justice wasn't performance. Because in that moment, he became the performance, and Jasmine, she had just pulled back the curtain. The recording stopped. No reaction, no objections, not even a motion to strike, just silence. Clarence Thomas didn't look up. Neither did anyone else. The room sat suspended, not in disbelief, but in recognition, because what they had just heard wasn't surprising. It was confirming, and Jasmine Crockett still didn't speak. She simply reached into her folder and pulled out a single document. No dramatics. No headline flashes. Just paper quiet, white and heavy with consequence. She placed it gently on the table in front of her, faced up, exposed. The title read, Community Outreach Initiative Grant Disbursement Summary. Below it, a figure uno, Sibe, Ling, recipient, Virginia Thomas Scholarship Fund. She didn't hold it up. She didn't wave it around for cameras that weren't there. She just let it sit. A spotlight without light. Then her voice, calm, even, not accusing. I'm just curious. Can the committee clarify something for me? No one moved. Why does this document, she tapped the top corner with a single finger, list the purpose of this transfer as post-ruling strategic initiative? Eyes narrowed. Papers shuffled, but still no answers. She waited a moment, then continued. And why, she added softly, was this money transferred in the exact same week the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Earthbridge Energy? That name changed the air in the room. Earthbridge Energy. The case had been massive. Billions of dollars in environmental waivers, a ruling that tilted the scales of regulation toward corporate giants and away from federal oversight. And now this, a scholarship fund, a 7-figure donation, and a note referencing strategy. After the ruling, not before, not during, after, no one spoke. Not the senator 2 seats to the left, who had once fundraised with Earthbridge executives. Not the clerk who had triple confirmed the donation's tax-exempt status, and not Clarence Thomas, whose face now held still like stone. Because it didn't matter whether the document was technically legal. It mattered that it raised a question. One, no one in that room wanted to touch. But Jasmine, she didn't blink. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even look angry. She just let the question sit next to the paper, like a candle next to dry grass. One spark away from everything catching fire. And still, no one reached for water. No one moved to speak. Because there are moments in a room where power shifts, not through yelling, not through threats, but through a single page, and a woman unafraid to let silence do the speaking. She didn't rush, didn't lean forward, didn't even raise her voice. Jasmine Crockett simply closed the folder in front of her and looked up, It was the first time she had locked eyes with him that day. Clarence Thomas met her gaze. For a man used to delivering final decisions, his eyes now held something else. Stillness, and behind it, something quieter. Something harder to name. She let the moment breathe. No one interrupted. No one moved. And then Jasmine spoke. "Justice Thomas," she said calmly, "I'm not here to accuse you." Her tone wasn't sharp. It wasn't dramatic. It was measured, intentional. "I haven't made a claim. I haven't offered an interpretation." She paused, letting the words echo off the oak walls. "I've played a recording, a simple statement, a fact undeniable. And now I'd like to ask one question." She leaned back in her chair, hands folded again. No dramatics, no pageantry, just presence. "Do you acknowledge," she asked gently, "that the voice we all just heard is yours?" That was it. No accusation, no cross-examination, just a question. 7 secondes passed. Then 10. He didn't blink. I didn't nod. Didn't deny. Clarence Thomas sat motionless, as if silence might somehow shield him. But in that moment, his silence became something else entirely. It became a response, not a denial, not a confirmation, just a void. And the room filled with people who had once measured power by volume, now measured it by what wasn't said. Because in the world of law, words are evidence. But in the court of public truth, so is silence. Jasmine didn't repeat the question. She didn't need to. It was already circling the room, landing in the mind of every person present. He didn't have to answer for the world to hear it. He already had, and now there was no taking it back. No footnote, no explanation, no press statement. Just that moment frozen in the air, where the most powerful man in the room suddenly looked small. Not because someone shouted over him, but because someone had the courage to ask, and the wisdom to let the silence speak for itself. The room never officially adjourned. There was no gavel, no final remarks, no vote. People simply left one by one, quietly, like witnesses walking away from something they couldn't unsee. By nightfall, the clip was already out. It wasn't posted by a media outlet. It wasn't leaked by staff. It came from someone who had sat in that room, a low-resolution, off-angle capture from a device that shouldn't have been recording, but it was real, and it spread like fire. The voice, the dollar amount, the silence. Within hours, it was trending worldwide. Number 1, aux 7 millions questions. It wasn't just a hashtag, it was a mirror. Legal blogs exploded. Editorial boards scrambled. Overnight, petitions began circulating, calling for a full review of every decision Clarence Thomas had touched in the last 10 years. Law professors who once tiptoed around the topic were now writing op-eds with titles like Ethics, Power, and the Price of Silence. And then came the words that would stick, not from a pundit, not from a politician, but from a constitutional law scholar at Georgetown who wrote, "Jasmine Crockett didn't accuse Clarence Thomas of a crime. She didn't demand his resignation. She didn't raise her voice. She asked the question. And in doing so, she forced the entire system to finally look in the mirror." That quote went viral because it wasn't just about one man. It was about the spaces we call sacred, being treated like private clubs. It was about the decisions that shape our lives being whispered behind closed doors. It was about the dangerous belief that power, if quiet enough, becomes invisible. But Jasmine Crockett refused to let silence become permission. And what made her act so devastating wasn't the evidence, it was the grace. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't post a statement. She didn't gloat or spin or amplify. She just typed one sentence. It appeared on her official page without photo or flair. Just plain text. A question doesn't hurt anyone if the answer is innocent. That line was shared by millions. It was painted onto protest signs, printed on T-shirts, and etched into conversations that hadn't happened in decades. But more importantly, it started something. Law students began asking how judicial ethics are enforced. Young attorneys began tracing the funding paths behind scholarships and outreach initiatives, and citizens, ordinary people. We began to understand that integrity in public service isn't about speeches. It's about accountability and courage. Because Jasmine never raised her voice, but she raised the standard. In a world where outrage comes cheap and truth is often buried beneath spectacle, She reminded everyone that there is still power in asking the right question at the right time in the right way. Not to destroy, but to reveal, because in the end, the dangerous person in the room isn't the one who shouts. It's the one who sees what others look away from and dares to